Thank you also to the audience for joining us today for the Crazy Rich Data session. This is such a great and timely topic to discuss. There's never been a more exciting time to dive into the world of data. We know all companies now do recognize the power of data to transform the world of work, with many businesses now putting this at the center of their strategy. There's something like 97% of executives investing in big data and AI initiatives for their organization. So whether you're looking to bring data to your business strategy, or you're a data professional, or you're looking to enter the field, we're all hoping that you get some great insights out of the discussion today. Before we get started, a reminder to please ask some questions, and we will get to those at the end. We have a great panel and lineup of speakers joining us today. As mentioned, we have Celine from the Bank of Singapore, we have Sunita from Microsoft, and Dat from Foodpanda. So we're going to get started, and before we do, I'd love for all of you, or each of you, to tell us a little bit more about yourselves. So if you could share a little bit about your current role, about your career journey, and how you got to where you are today. So why don't we start with Celine?
Hi everyone, thanks very much for inviting me today, and I hope that you can see and hear me properly. So my name is Celine, and I'm the Chief Data and Innovation Officer at Bank of Singapore. So what does it mean, Chief Data and Innovation Officer? It's one of those new fancy names and role that have been created in order to kind of help to manage the value of data for an organization. So a few words about myself. I'm not coming from a data or technical background. I'm a sinologist originally, which means that I studied Chinese culture and Chinese language for some years at university. Then I ended up working in research and development in China. I spent 12 years of my life in China working in research and development for automotive. I used to work in the end of my career on autonomous vehicle and connected services. So I have more of a digital marketing background. I used to purchase digital media buying, so programmatic media. This is where I started to work in data, right? Because when you do programmatic media buying, you need to work with data, recommendation, target recommendation, and then of course you want to track what is the performance of your purchase. And so that's how you start working with data and analytics. Then moving into the power of data for connected car, autonomous vehicle, developing algorithms with the bunch of data scientists for autonomous vehicle. Again, more looking at the value of data and what do we make out of it and how do we monetize that, than being a real data scientist myself, but I need to understand how that works, right? That's the basic. From that, I moved to Singapore, came to insurance to work on telematic services. One of my big customer when I was working on connected car was actually insurance company, right? How do you use connected car data to price your insurance better? So I moved on the other side, on the insurance side, and this is where I become, for the first time in my life, Chief Data Officer of AXA Insurance Singapore. And so here, now I'm doing pretty much similar role at Bank of Singapore, but it's about, how do you look at the tech stack of the organization? Do we have the right tool, the right platform? Is Python available, for the analysts? Do we have a visualization tool implemented, Power BI, Tableau, ClickSense, whatever, right? What is our strategy to store our data and distribute them properly? Where is our one source of truth? Do we have the right, like tool and tech stack? Second thing is really about the upskilling. So that's why for me, upskilling and data culture is a very big topic, because not only outside, but also inside organization, we need to educate the people. People need to change their skill set from Excel and VBA macros to Python and visualization tool, for example. And they need to move from working in a reactive manner to working in a more predictive and proactive manner. So this requires a change of skill set, an upskilling strategy, and also most importantly, a change of mindset. And the third thing, it's related to the overall data governance, right? How do we protect our data? How do we ensure we got the right data quality? Do we capture the right data? How do we capture them? Because garbage in, garbage out, right? You guys know if you're programming that it's not a question of being a magician data scientist. If the data are bad, right, you won't be able to predict, have good outcome out of that, right? And the growing question of how do we actually industrialize AI in the organization ensure that algorithms are also, fair, ethical, transparent, and that you have a certain explainability in the model that we are actually launching. So that's pretty much it.
Great, thank you. And what about yourself, Sunita? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, thanks, Elisia. Hi, everyone. I firstly have to apologize on behalf of the people upstairs. Hopefully you don't hear any background noise, but there is some construction going on upstairs. So as Elisia pointed out, I am the Data and AI Solutions Lead at Microsoft. And I basically lead this area for the whole of Microsoft Asia, which is quite a few countries: the Greater China region, Japan, India, the entire APAC region, Korea, and the Australia, New Zealand, ANZ region as well. So it's quite a handful, and especially with where things are right now with the pandemic, it's quite an interesting time to be in this space. Data and AI is obviously not just data and AI, there's data analytics, AI, IoT, the entire work at Microsoft within the Azure space. So that's the cloud space. So obviously it's everything to do with the data services within Azure and in Microsoft. So you have the Azure Data Factory, you have a data warehouse. How do you want to actually strategize, and what does it mean for solutioning for our customers in this space? Then you have under analytics, you have the visualization, the data visualization Power BI tool. You have the Synapse stuff, which is brand new, which is fantastic. And then you have the entire AI set of toolkits, right? So you have all the cognitive services, AI bots, and the hardcore computer vision and all that sort of wonderful stuff. So similar to Celine, I actually don't come from a data science background, but I do come from what we used to be known as data analysis background. So just to clarify, I'm a math and physics major and I was doing my PhD in physics. Computational physics is very much data analysis. No one actually called it, machine learning and computer vision back then, but it's all of the above. And then when I moved back to Singapore, and because my family was here, I came back here and I started in consulting. And I was working as a data scientist for many of my clients. And I've been through the entire Big Four, Big Five consulting firms. So in my last consulting firm, my role was to lead AI advisory for ASEAN region, as well as responsible AI as well. So that is everything that, you have to obviously look into data governance and data privacy and everything else, but as well as all of that, where does AI ethics and responsible AI come into play? So that's the whole fairness and transparency and everything else that was mentioned earlier. And obviously in Microsoft, my role is in every single AI and data implementation that all of these things are taken into account. Because if you don't know me already, I'm a very strong believer in not separating AI and responsible AI, that every single AI implementation has to be responsible. And yeah, so I'm also very passionate about where things are going with respect to data, AI, and where we want to see the organization taking things forward. I've worked with a large set of organizations, both small and big. So happy to talk more about it today. Thanks.
Great, thank you. It's interesting to hear both of your journeys and all of the opportunities available. I'm sure we'll dig in soon. And Dat as well, how about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Dat, and I'm currently the Director of Data at Foodpanda. So a little bit of info about myself. I come from a technical background. I have both bachelor and master degree in computer science. I write code for a living for a long time. So my career has always been luckily involving data, from data storage, from distributed system, networking, scalability, to something more relevant to the business, where we talk about data warehousing, data engineering, business analytics, and machine learning. Most of the companies that I meet with startups and technology-driven companies of various size. So it's from small companies that you probably never heard of to Zalora, the likes of Honestbee, Uber, and now Foodpanda. So currently at Foodpanda, I'm in charge of, I'll say almost everything data related. in the APAC and somewhat the European region as well, covering about 15 different countries at the moment. So we touch everything from data warehousing, data engineering, business analytics, automation, and machine learning. So in my day-to-day work, I involve, it involves a lot with working with, not just the data people, but also the business people, the tech and the product people. Figuring out how do we bring data value to the organization. On the other side, we have hundreds of different data sources, different databases. How do we bring them all together, clean them up, put them in a nice space so everybody can make use of it? Because like Celine said earlier, garbage in, garbage out. So I mean, at the end of the day, for me, it's all about how do we make use of the huge amount of data we have and the knowledge, the experience that we have on our people to actually make a positive impact to the organization.
It's fantastic. Well, let's dive into, I guess, how we can make an impact. I know, we know that a lot of businesses in the future will be driven by data, whether it's, using machine learning to personalize experiences or predict the next big thing. We're all recognizing the power of data now. So in your experience spearheading various data projects in each of your organizations, what are some of the initiatives that have actually led to the greatest business impacts that you've seen along the way? Celine, could we start with you?
Sorry again?
Oh, sure. So talking about business impacts, organizations, have you seen, what are some of the projects that you've seen that have really driven business impacts?
I mean, especially when you start fresh, right, with new teams, or it's one of your first a data project that you're actually launching in an organization, you will always look at like two aspects, right? That's the first use cases that people can see have impact, right? Depending on what is your industry. I would say that for other more like, for example, retail or other, you will look at cross-sell, upsell, right? How can I look at increasing my top line thanks to the use of data and targeted marketing, for example. In the financial services, one of the often used use cases is regarding fraud and risk management. So, trying to identify through anomaly detection, for example, some fraudulent behavior, right? In the insurance space, it's quite common when it comes to claims management, but also, in trading, insider trading, customer trading, all of those anomaly detection use cases are quite popular in financial services whenever you start your data journey. And then, so it's either one or the other. It's either a growth use case or either a risk prediction or fraud detection use case, because those are the ones that are easy to understand for people, usually have big impact, and I would say that's usually where we start. But then quickly come use cases that are linked to natural language processing. A lot of processes, especially in financial services, are still very manual, using unstructured data in the form of PDF or emails, right, that need to be extracted and then put into a system and other. This is where NLP model do make sense in order to increase the efficiency of the organization. But those use cases are less visible. So I would advise to start with one of the major use cases that have a real business impact before you can go through the efficiency and intelligent automation type of use cases that really have value but are more difficult to quantify.
Excellent. And how about, Sunita, in the, I guess, various organizations you work with and projects you're working on, where have you seen the most impact being driven by data or projects being implemented?
Yeah, so I definitely think that people just get very afraid that they don't have enough data to start with. So I think a lot of people actually put projects on hold because of that very reason. But I just want to say that the ones who I have seen become really successful are the ones who actually take the plunge. And just use the data that they have and start with that. So I'm thinking about even like, transportation companies or like travel companies, like, you're looking at a vast number of things that you can touch on, And I think where I've seen the most success with data is for one to use both internal data and external data. So, within the organization, you may have limited data to start with that you want to analyze, but then you link it up with, say, data from retail or data from some other industry. And then you really start to see the power of data because it all comes together. As an example, right? If I were traveling from, say, I don't know, Orchard to the east, for example, right? And that travel distance, what am I going to see along the way as a consumer? I'm going to see, what kind of advertisements are along the way. So look at, so there was one time when I looked at a billboard in a bus stop along the way when I was in the bus. And I was like, that doesn't look right because, it's talking about how, robots are going to take over jobs. And I'm like, whoa. It's like things like that you start to really, analyze. Then you say along the way, you stop at a 7-Eleven because you're thirsty. How many people actually do that? And, where do you want to position your retail stores? Where do you want to bring in, consumer attractions? All of those things actually become super powerful when you know how to tap into both, internal and external data. So I've seen the most success for companies who are willing to use alternative data, which is external data, and bring that in when doing analysis.
That's really interesting. And that moving on to you with a bit of experience in startups, I'd love to hear about the projects that might help more of the early stage startups in driving impact for their businesses.
Yeah, so from my side, the answer can be a little bit less sexy, but most of the company when I start with or when I talk to, the first and foremost project is always about re-evaluating the current data infrastructure, the data platform, the integrations, the streaming data, data warehouse, machine learning pipelines, etc. So the answer is whether we start with it or we review it from scratch, or we try to revamp it and fix whatever can be fixed. And for me, this is usually the most important data project that everybody has to do. And it will be very, very impactful if we do it right. By doing it right, I mean doing it at the right time with the right amount of investment, the right amount of skill set and technologies. So once that is done, right, so a lot of tons of application automations, recommendation engines, marketing automation you can do. And after it's done, sometimes when I talk to the companies, they would ask me, what is the first project should I start with? And I usually ask them back, where do you spend the most amount of money in, and where you want to optimize it? You want to reduce those costs, or you want to get more revenue, and we can just start from there.
Great. And I guess speaking about starting and where to start, Sunita, you've had experience driving strategic changes with C-level stakeholders and helping to, I guess, drive their organizations to becoming more data and AI driven. What are some of the advice or pieces of advice you'd give to leaders who are going through that change and embarking on their journeys?
Yeah, great question. I think it's been challenging in many ways, right? Especially where companies, or at least the leaders of the companies, are not bringing their entire organization along in the journey. And I think that's where you're just going to fall apart, and it becomes very difficult to construct a data-driven or data-first culture within an organization without the employees or people who matter actually not being on board in that journey. So I think that the changing or refining the culture to start with is super important. And I know this is an overused term, but change management, or however you want to call it, but just putting in a culture from top down is extremely crucial. The second thing I would say is, metrics are very important. So what do you want to get out of doing all of this? Because it takes investment and it takes time and it takes effort. So what exactly do you want to actually put in? What do you want to get out of it for all that you're putting in? I think the metrics or defining what success looks like, I think that's very important to start with. And then do proof of concept, because they are very key to helping to make sure, number one, you are targeting the right things, Number two, that your people are getting on board. I think that's super important, because when you do proof of concept, the employees actually get to see, where is this going, and get to see, success coming out of little things. And then they're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And, they actually tend to give their ideas as well. They're like, oh, maybe we can do this as next step, and then you become a more of a, the culture itself changes within the organization. I've seen that is more effective than a big bang approach, where, you're trying to do something and then everything falls apart if you don't get your people on board. And I think the third thing is data democratization. I know it's an overused term as well, but that's super important. Give the people the power to play with the data. But the only time they're going to learn the power of data is when they get to play with the data. So I'm not saying everyone in the organization becomes a data scientist, because that's not possible. But what I'm saying is there are tools out there that enable every single person to contribute, whether it's contributing through machine learning, which is auto ML, or something that allows them to do it without having to code extensively, or people in visualization tools who can go in and say, oh, that's how it looks. That makes sense to me. Let me try and do this next. And because they know their business, they know what the data would tell them, and then they would give ideas. So I think it all stems from the change in the culture is the most important thing. Does that answer your question, Elisia?
Yeah, it does. And I think I know data transformation is hard. I think it's around 69% might fail year on year, and often it may not necessarily be the technology, but it's actually the culture and everything else underlying that.
People, yeah.
Celine, what about you? What are some of the pitfalls that people or companies or startups can you think could avoid? Have you seen any, I guess, dramatic failures that come to mind that we can all learn from, or along the way?
I think, I can't recall failures, right? People usually don't really advertise that much about their failure, right? And I think that's, persistency and, being able to actually be resilient. Again, I think that people is one of the main aspects of things. This is why also, there are a few pitfalls that I would advise any company that is starting their data transformation journey. Would be first one, your data department should not be under IT, right? In a traditional organization, right? It sometimes falls there, but I don't think that's the right thing, because again, right, it's a lot of change management, culture, training, engagement, communication, and second thing is really the target operating model according to your level of data maturity. You can see, and it was quite common in the past to have some kind of central data analytic team, right, that were working pretty much based on a request. But we see more and more, as Sunita just mentioned, right, data democratization. Everybody needs to have access to the data in a kind of real-time fashion way, right, to be able to take the right data-driven decision. And only the business know what the data means at the end of the day, right? Because, well, they are the one that are actually holding the number and understanding the process and the customer and whatever is done behind that, right? So they need to be empowered to have access to the data, be able to understand them. And so, so the question is, how do you empower them? So, of course, there's a suite of tools, right? All the self-service visualization. I saw that there was one question regarding, what is one of the skill set that data analysts need to have? For me, first answer is Python, right? Everybody should actually be able to code in Python nowadays if you want to do analytics, but also visualization and data storytelling, right? And it's not only about having access to data and trying to explore them. It's really about, okay, what is the business use case? And then, what can, too often the business think that data scientists are also magicians, right? They will give them answer to things that they don't, you can't, they come with the no question and they want the question and the answer, right, to be actually done by the same person. And you're like, yeah, no, we can back you up with data, but at the end of the day, it still remains your business, right? It's your business strategy, right? How you want to act to retain that customer. We can tell you who has a high propensity to leave, right? We can, do some what if scenario on, if you would do that action or that action, what do we think that could actually works best? But at the end of the day, don't expect us to run after the customer, which is data scientists, right? It's everybody has their role. So I think the operating model of having as well people that understand data in the business is also very important. we've seen this role called AI translator or analytic translator, that actually emerge, or citizen data scientists, or whatever you want to call them, right? But people that have a minimum of understanding of data and that are able to actually talk with data scientists or data analysts or even more technical background people and make that link. And I think it's one of the growing, needs. And today, so governance is very important. So what I advocate is always a kind of hub and spoke model. So I usually run the hub team, right, the center of excellence, with analysts, data engineer, data scientists, data governance people, data privacy people, right, where everybody has the knowledge. And our role is actually to educate some other teams or data champion within the business, right, but also to animate the community. So we have a lot of monthly meetup, but also educate the senior management. So we got a data board, right, where it's the place that actually management learn about data and is empowered to take decision. So it's a lot of people engagement and change management, as Sunita was actually just mentioning. So it's something that we should not forget. And third, on the data, the people and culture topic, one of the things that I think we should do much more is about looking at what are the type of job that will be, how will AI and automation in general affect any job that is currently out there, because there are a lot of jobs that are doing like manual thing in a repetitive manner, where the job will remain, some of the tasks will be automated, right? And so how do we upskill those people so they can actually work more on the labeling of the data, overseeing, a model in order to look after the, maintain the accuracy of it, rather than, we need to rethink as well those jobs and the impact that AI and automation will have on those people. And that's a very long-term journey. So we need to all start to look at it right now.
It's definitely a big topic, isn't it? At the moment, is robots taking our jobs? And no, there's a lot to be optimistic about. It's just about, bridging the gap and also, thinking about redeployment as well. So yeah, there's a lot of change, and data can help to drive change. And it seems, there needs to be a cultural shift too. And what about maybe going back to you, Dat, and Foodpanda? Once that change is implemented, Foodpanda is like undeniably a leading player in the food delivery space. What are the top 3 areas that data has actually helped Foodpanda gain an advantage in the market, or over other players as well?
Yeah, so there are these 3 main areas that we, the data teams focusing on looking at to help Foodpanda. Firstly, is around, the restaurant partners, know them well. So, we have all the information about them, how fast they can prepare the food, their pricing comparing to their competitors in the same area. We know about the user type of customer that they have, what do they search for, when do they search for the food, their click-through rate, cart-to-cart rate, conversion rate, and so on. So the question for us is, for example, is how do we rank them fairly in the restaurant listing page? And we push them up for those that have a higher potential, better customer experience. They should have more visibilities. Can we push those that have more issues than the others down? Because that is only fair. Secondly, we need to know our delivery partners, their performance, their way of working. How do we create the right incentives and reward for them so that in turn they would be happy and they would be motivated, and that leads to the customers to be happy, right? So lastly is know your customers. This is where I think a lot of data science application can be applied. We're talking about personalizing the experience all the way from opening the app to making the orders, and then customer experience, customer service at the end as well. How do we know the favorite cuisine? How do we create and then personalize the marketing incentives? What do we have to do to get them to order more from Foodpanda, for example? Right? Knowing the potential lifetime value so that we can invest early on them as well. So, I mean, personally, I don't know for sure how well we are doing this comparing to our competitors. we probably never know. But I do know for a fact that there's still a lot of things for us to improve. So.
Right. You mentioned, talking about your customers, and that's a big question. I think speaking about customers and consumer behavior, Celine, this is for you, and moving more into the marketing side of things. There is a cookieless future on the horizon, and it's making it a little bit more difficult for marketers to sort of track and respond to consumer behavior. And we've seen that with certain launches, more greater levels of consumer privacy are, I guess, at the forefront. So what should marketing and growth and advertising teams keep in mind when navigating through these changes? And how do you see this space, I guess, changing beyond 2021?
Okay, that's a very wide question per se. I'm also a DPO, right? So I'm a data protection officer, and question of data monetization and who is owning because at the end of the day, privacy is one thing, right? It's the question is, right, what problem are we actually trying to solve? And this question of data ownership, like who is the owner of the customer data, right? So we always hear in a lot of organizations, well, it's the customer at the end of the day who is owner of the data. Yeah, well, if he's the owner of the data, why are all the other company making money out of his data but not him, right? So it's this is the real question that I believe the whole industry has to answer, right? It's about real ownership of the data and also real consent, right? Today we're seeing consent, through ticking on a box, and then, you can't just do anything if you don't tick on the box. So of course you're going to tick on the box, right? It's kind of forced consent, right? But are the people really aware of, which data are they sharing? What are they sharing it? And they also, you have, I've lived in several countries, right? European, I'm French originally, right? Lived in Germany, and then I lived in China. And the notion of privacy is not the same, in all countries. That's what I can tell you, right? There is a huge culture component in that, right? If you go, some study that we've done, like for example in China, as long as the Chinese consumer can benefit from sharing his data and can get a lower price, a better service, like he would be agreeable to it. And data privacy for him is just like, I don't want my wife to know about my whereabouts, for example, like this is what data privacy. But there's a kind of conscience that everyone knows that China internet is actually tracked, and there's a huge cyber police and stuff. So it's not a secret. So they're perfectly okay with that because they have grown in an environment where this is what privacy means for them. In a European context, right? People and regulators sees data as an analog things, right? Like it's like I own my data the same as I own my house, right? Like it's my property, right? Which doesn't really make sense because data is an asset that can be used by multiple people at the same time in order to derive different type of values. And of course, targeted advertising is, it's always a question of do you prefer to have advertising or an advertising that is actually relevant to you, right? And so it's my view is that in the future and in the coming years, we are seeing more and more development of national identity wallets. Everybody know about SingPass in Singapore. So even though it's still hosted in the GovTech side, right? Like tomorrow, those kind of solutions are also emerging, like on the blockchain. So people can have their own kind of wallet where they exactly know what type of data are they sharing with which organization on a real-time basis, and that will also help in terms of data quality, right? If they were always, if we could also get the data updated by the customer themselves, right? So you don't have all this internal process to be able to make sure that, I don't know, your passport number is not expired, this kind of thing that create a lot of operational issues on the back end. So yeah, I think that's my view. I believe that was a very high level answer for a high level question. But
yes, yeah, I know it's a very broad topic to talk about, hard to nail down in 2 minutes. Sunita, I would love for you to expand a little bit more on responsible AI. I know you're passionate about this topic. What does that mean for the audience?
Oh boy, I need an entire hour for this. Yeah. So yeah, it's how to be responsibly implementing artificial intelligence. And I know that there are many definitions floating out there, about what it is. I think the key thing is making sure that you have the key elements involved in every single AI implementation. The first one, and I know there are different variations of this. The first one being fairness. How do you make sure that any artificial intelligence implementation, analytics implementation, even is fair in the way that it treats the data, is fair in the way that the algorithms are written, is fair in the way that the outputs are spit out. So I think just in terms of every single at every single step of the AI journey, to make sure things are being fairly considered. I think the second part is transparency, and this goes for whether it's an organizational culture, whether it's the AI implementation. How much is too much when it comes to fairness and explainability? And I know that because people are getting more and more aware now of the pitfalls of AI, they're also starting to question a lot more about, why has this been the outcome of the organization for me? Why have you done this for me? Like, why has this been the decision for me? So to think about, credit scoring models out there, right? So why is this the thing for me? If you think about insurance plans, why is this insurance plan the one for me? Why aren't you giving me a better insurance? Like, things like that. People are starting to question these things, which I think is fantastic. Like, I am so happy to see that, because that means that people are aware of data pitfalls and analytics and AI pitfalls. But what does that mean for the organization? They really need to be prepared to be able to explain what the model has done, what data it has considered. Things like recruitment, right? I mean, we've seen plenty of examples out there about how things have gone wrong with recruitment in the past, if it's built on AI models. What does this actually mean for people coming back and saying, are you assessing me because I'm a female who's applied for this job? Are you assessing me because of some other reason for this job? Tell me that you're fairly considering me for this job, right? So I think explainability and transparency is top of mind. There are many things, right? So what does ethics even mean when it comes to these things, right? So I think more and more as AI has been implemented, people are understanding that things can go wrong if not governed and managed properly. And I think this is where responsible AI is super key. As I said, I need at least an hour to describe the entire thing, but we've seen lots of things happen that have gone wrong. So we've seen, as I said, recruitment things. We've seen how, computer vision, which looks at your face and tells you certain things and then decides your fate or next steps based on how you look, that can be a hugely detrimental thing, right? Because if it's unfairly processing, that means you're going to get an unfair treatment at the end. So how do you tell that, me being, brown skin, for instance, I am not going to be unfairly treated by the AI model, to make sure that everything is fairly considered. I think the main thing as well is how do you make sure that security is taken into account when it comes to AI, that it still has privacy, security, and all these things, enablers in place. So it's a whole lot of principles that go into AI implementations. And I want to say that people often say we have a data governance in place. Do we really need an AI ethics committee? I say, yes, we do, because there are two different things, right? One is to make sure that your data in its estate is governed and managed and has privacy rules and everything in place. When it comes to AI ethics committee, it's to make sure that the AI models, as well as which data the model feeds out of, all of that is fairly and properly taken into account and is governed properly. So you definitely need both. I think there is no doubt about that. We sent out surveys in my previous job to a few companies, and they've come back and said, yes, we have an AI ethics committee in our organization. But when you actually drill down further, you really discover that that's not the case. And people are mixing things up. So you definitely need two different things to look at here.
Right.
I need another 45 minutes.
So many things to talk about. So let's get into, I guess, teams and skills a little bit more. I can see some questions from the audience as well. So we might start with, I I guess let's start with the skills. We did talk about them before, but are there any big skills gaps that you're seeing now within teams? And what are the must-haves on your team probably another really big question, must-haves for perhaps a small enterprise with their data team, and then perhaps all the way through to a larger enterprise. Dat, do you want to start with how you might shape your team and the skills you must have?
Sure. So I think, well, in my team, there are data scientists, data engineers, and data analysts who might have different skill sets. Mm-hmm. But the only one thing that we have in common, among other things is SQL. So this has been the language I just looked it up, it's 47 years now. It's still be using very, very heavily. And I see people using it, but also using it wrong. I've seen people doing like a select star from one table into an Excel file, and then they'll do a lot of stuff on the Excel application, but it's extremely bad because when you scale it up to 5 times, 10 times more size, you cannot really scale your laptop more to handle that anymore, and you are stuck. So I have seen so many things like that happening. So SQL definitely the language that everybody should learn, not just the data people, but non-data people. And then on my side, I think depending on their title, the roles, they can look at the only language, like programming language, aside from SQL, I would say Python. If you can only learn one language, go for it. Don't look at anything else. And then beyond that, data visualization, data storytelling, statistics is important as well. When it comes to data engineering, there's so many technologies out there, so many frameworks that you kind of like have to. Sometimes I tell the guys like, you get back to the basics, programming language, and then you start to find out how you can learn new things faster, because you cannot just give up to this by learning new language all the time.
And Sunita or Celine, would you add to any of those?
No, I think I definitely agree. This is exactly what is in my own upskilling roadmap journey. So we have about 100 analysts across the organization. So not in IT and not in my team that we are training over the next 18 months in SQL, basic query, Python, right? Basic Python programming and data wrangling, and then visualization, like being able to use by themselves a Power BI or Tableau or whatsoever. For me, it's pretty much the same tool. But so getting them independent and people from the business, again, as that say, right? It's not only people from data, but everyone in the business should actually be able to kind of read a Python code and understand what it's doing, right? When it's importing a pandas, libraries to do whatever, right? You're not requested to code tomorrow, but at least you should understand the mechanism, and you should understand as well that for people to be data driven, first thing is that they need to have data access, right? And this is not a given in a lot of organizations, banking being one of them, I can tell you, right? Getting access to data is usually not something that has been done. And so that's why people are just like trying to get CSV file downloaded from here and there, and then as that said, program everything into a VBA macro on their own computer up to the time where the size of the data set is too heavy and it takes about 2 hours of switching down everything to be able to run your models, right? So this needs to stop, right? Business needs to be enabled with a programmatic access to the data, and have proper server to do the analytics and be able to themselves automate their analysis. It's a job. So thinking out of the box, and then process mapping. So design thinking is something else that we don't always think about, but sometimes processes are just wrong, right? And when I talk to the business, one of the first things that I do is ask them 5 times why. Sometimes you will realize that whatever they are doing has just no sense, right? And it's just a question of process reengineering. So this is where data design thinking can also help out a lot in looking at what is the process now and what should actually be, what should it be.
Well, that's great.
I think in addition to that, what I would add is for bigger organizations, I would look at cloud upskilling as well, because a lot of the bigger organizations are doing this all on a cloud platform. So whether it's, I'm going to be biased a little bit, but Azure or AWS or GCP or whatever you want to do, get those skills in place. And those skills are available online, right? So I can speak for Azure that we have, certifications online that can help you get your hands into the Azure environment and actually help you understand how it looks. So it actually brings together data science, data engineering, and the whole works together. It also brings together data ops and DevOps and security. And that takes your data end to end, right? That process of end to end data is extremely important. I think a lot of people, when they think about data, they think about data science. They completely forget about data engineering. And that is such a strong mandate to have skills in. It's not like in like maybe a year or two ago when data science used to be separate and data engineering used to be separate. Now it's all together and it's all being on the cloud. I think for the smaller organizations, I have a soft skill that I want to highlight is extremely important, and that is the ability and the want to learn new things, right? And I think that's what you need to look for when you're looking at fresh graduates that you want to hire. Someone who's having that flexibility to say, yes, I will learn it and I will do it. And not having a rigid mindset, oh, that doesn't seem like fun to me, that doesn't seem like something I can do. That's not someone you want to hire, right? So smaller organizations definitely start from that. Bigger organizations, all of what Darren and Celine have already mentioned, and cloud upskilling, super important. DevOps, super important. And data security skills, very, very important. So I think those are additional things that I would like to add.
Thank you. That's really informative. I think there's a related question here, and it's, as a company grows and reaches greater scale, how do you ensure the quality of your data team and processes? So I think you did answer some of those things, but is there anything you'd add to that, any of the panelists?
Yeah, I think when things grow, what I've seen is you want that automated data flow. And when you have an automated data flow in the back end, there's always a DevOps, data ops kind of thing that you want to establish. Just make sure that your data from your development environment all the way through to your production is able to flow through without any obstacles along the way, but with the right controls and security. And that's only possible when you have a really strong data ops and DevOps system set in place. And again, that for the bigger organizations, you have to move into the cloud to be able to do that at scale. I think that's super important. When it comes to managing teams, and I know that there was another one which was around geographically dispersed teams, I just want to say that this is where data democratization is so important. Just making sure that people have access to the data, whether it's through visualization or other means, that people are able to see the same thing, whether I'm located in Sydney or whether I'm located in Singapore. Everyone from the team should be able to look at that same screen on Tableau or Power BI, whatever you want to use, and say, oh, that's the trend. And let's now talk maybe on Teams or Zoom or whatever. But, and then say, this is the kind of things that we can take away from it, and these are the insights that we can get out of it. So it's not like it's in, olden days anymore, where you're going to have different people saying different things. You're going to have these tools in place, and everyone can see the same thing. And I think that's where data democratization is extremely important.
Great, thank you. And there's another question here. As data leaders, how involved are you with the day-to-day? If not, how do you keep yourselves updated with so many new data trends and tools? That I'll pose that one to you.
Sure. I think I can say myself lucky, or I don't know if it's unlucky or not, but I'm still very involved with data, down to the level of like reviewing the code and see, where things went wrong with this particular set of data when it comes to like, the data producer from a different squad in product and tech side or marketing side, etc. And I think that a lot of the time now it's just about asking the right question and asking the right people now. So I find myself lucky, but also because I'm spending a lot more time on that. It has less time for me to actually learn new skills, to be honest. And for myself, how do I keep up with new stuff? I mean, personally, I don't read data books anymore. I follow the trend from Twitter, from Medium, YouTube, social media, Reddit, a lot of those things. That's how I can, like you get a community to vote for the things that are more relevant, that are new, that are interesting, and then you can read through that instead of like trying to go through everything and then you realize that, oh, this might not be so new anymore. This might not be so useful anymore.
Okay, so I mean, it does bring us to the future and trends. Celine and Sunita, what are some of the top trends that are evolving, for the future, and what should we know about that's on the horizon when it comes to data? Another big question. Or we don't.
I believe it is. I think that cloud adoption, and I'm not working for Microsoft, right? So I can really say that, right? Cloud adoption and so cloud computing in general, potentially also blockchain, right? Like we see that blockchain as a DLT technology is also actually increasingly important, not only on the crypto side, right, but really on other applications. We've seen the non-fungible token use cases booming recently with COVID, but so I think all of the things need to be looked at. I think data sharing and what are the technology also to be able to share data across institution without infringing any of the data privacy law. We can see that there is a boom in all the data privacy technology and platform, synthetic data as well, like in order to be able to experiment without having to use like real data sets, some of the trends that I can see. And so another thing that I would say is really the use of alternative data that is actually growing. So, I mean, I could take the example of finance. We're using a lot of market data, right? The Bloomberg, Refinitiv, all the data from all the exchange, and in order to data our price, for example, is very important. But today we can see a growth of usage of alternative data. I would think about, one of the use cases that we're working on is to be able to identify if you're, how much you're invested in green finance or sustainable finance, as we call this, ESG, being able to give to our customer an impact of how much greenhouse gas has been saved for him by investing into that specific fund, because we're collecting directly from the solar panel farm, that have been invested by that fund, how much is so the use of alternative data, I think is something that is growing as well, including IoT.
It's definitely something I've learned about today. And what about you, Sunita? What are you excited about in the future? What are the trends you're seeing?
So many things. I think in addition to cloud, I also want to stress the hybrid cloud and edge. I think that's where a lot of things are moving towards now, especially with the whole AR, VR kind of expectations of people, right? They want things on the go, right in front of them. It's like we're almost getting very greedy now, which is fantastic to see, actually. Which is, we want to see things as we walk along. We want to see things. This is how we want to see things in real time and stuff. So definitely, cloud can only, cloud takes us so far, and then edge takes over. So that hybrid of cloud and edge together is, I think, where things are moving towards. I mentioned this earlier, but data ops, which is an entire new field from DevOps, which is like an end-to-end process of data. That flow of data is extremely crucial. Where is your data actually going? And you think about like data as in, everything as simple as, if you're managing a business, whether it's a startup or otherwise, where is your cash flow, right? How is it moving? So think about it in the same sense, right? So you think about data, where exactly is it going, and how is it reaching the people it needs to reach? I think the other thing which people undermine is, data visualization, which is very important, and it's growing in importance. There is no doubt about that, because as the questions had indicated, this is how people from different parts of the world would come together to see things. I think this was a Gartner term, but it's a really interesting one, composable data. which is, things like, how do you extract data from everywhere? So your data AI solution, your analytics solution, bring it together. What people do is often they think about data as only one direction. That once it's gone into an AI and it outputs something, then you're done. But you don't undermine the kind of output that's coming out of an AI solution. You recycle that back into your data storage, and then you do your trends on top of that as well. So you do analysis on top of analyzed data, and that is gold. I mean, like, you are losing out on so much if you don't recycle that. So I think the whole thing, end-to-end data flow is extremely important. And to be honest, as I just said, there is no end, so it's like kind of a loop. So try and loop your data back, and you get a lot more insights out of it.
Excellent. And we've got just a few minutes left, so I'll finish off with one question. Are there any sort of must-have tools that you would recommend for businesses, for enterprise to have or start using if you don't know where to start? I feel like I'm asking big questions every time. I know there's probably many, but any favorites?
Sunita, it's your time. Microsoft got everything. Go to Microsoft. Don't worry, they got everything you need.
Everything you need.
It's actually true though. So yeah, I mean, not going into any names, but I think cloud for sure. Cloud services is crucial. As I said, if you want to grow, if you want to scale, that's very important. And they are, and I can speak for Microsoft. Microsoft is growing with the demands that are coming through, right? So when I say edge, I mean that because obviously as a data company, we study our own data from clients, and we know that that's where the trend is going. So we obviously have to design things that the clients would want to then be able to use. So it's like, this is back to how we are using data as well internally in Microsoft, right? So, and analyze trends. So yeah, I definitely think that cloud services, as well as any of the tools that were highlighted before. So if you think about Python, super important. If you think about having that, and this is not a tool per se, technology-wise, but this is an extremely important thing. Having, agile teams. And again, it's an overused word, but team work is very crucial. Understanding who is playing what role within the team and how people come together, extremely important. It's not a tool, but it's a cultural tool to have, really.
Yeah, and Google is a great tool as well whenever you're looking for any information, isn't it? Even when you're a developer.
Excellent. We've got maybe one minute.
You meant Bing, right? Sorry. Yeah.
Of course.
Okay. So I guess final question, when we're thinking about data and using data and making decisions, how do we convince, higher management to stop sticking to the status quo and start making decisions based on data instead of based on gut feel? I know a lot of people do tend to lean towards gut feel. What's the one thing you might say, or one piece of advice?
Well, yeah, we need to be realistic, right? Data brings transparency, and senior management doesn't always like transparency because, it might showcase that they didn't do the right decision at the right time, right? So, I mean, thought about if you were the manager, someone just showed you through data that actually you were wrong in the past, right? So it's a lot of stakeholder management. I think you need to have a lie, and, I developed a tool with my team of automated data quality monitoring, right, where we coded our overall data quality policy in Python, and we are now able to see who is actually impacting our data quality from the right moment they put it into the system, right? And of course, it's kind of pointing finger at the end of the day, because then you have the data, you are able to prove through data the people that are not acting the way that they should, right? So it's normal that it's actually creates some kind of tension. Again, I think that was mentioning earlier, right? Like, find what is the biggest pain point, right? It might be, oh, my customer are leaving. It might be, oh, I can't grow quickly on that market, and try to solve one of the management pain point through data. So look at that, and of course, if you're pointing out that thing that they did in the past is not obviously the best one, that they will not really support you. So try to go into a greenfield territory or something that was not actually monitored. That would be my advice, right?
I think data governance is super important, and the data governance committee just having people as, so that the decisions are not with one single person, because people have biases. People do have that sense of, unfairness, and it's a natural thing. So you want a committee to make sure that there are a few people from each of the businesses representing that business. Even though there may be one person that you reach out to, at least two people attend that particular committee, and that, have a healthy debate. And it comes out of that which is the right way to do things. So it doesn't fall on one person's shoulders.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. I'm running a data board monthly with all the management senior committee member, right? So it's a committee where they get educated, because let's be realistic, none of them understand everything about data or cloud, or what self-service, so what is Python right now. It's not a snake, and so there's a lot of actually upskilling that needs to be done also for the management, but in a way where they don't lose face, right? So that's what you can do through that committee. And then after I make them vote, right? So there's this wonderful vote function on WebEx, right? So whenever there's a tension topic, right, then they just vote, right? And it's anonymous, and then we got the majority, we go for A or B, and then that's how decisions are taken. So I agree with Sunita, the fact that it not only relies on one single person, all the prioritization of the use case that it will be working on, for example, many things. Yeah,
that is excellent advice. I wish we could chat for longer, but that actually brings us to the very end of our panel. So I would like to thank Dat, Sunita, Celine for all of your insights and advice. It's been super informative. Again, thank you to the GovTech team for having us. And I hope that everybody can enjoy the rest of the festival as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elisia.
Everyone.